people who are living under the lordship of Christ, how will we carry ourselves? How will we become really spiritual members of our household as parents, as children, as husbands and wives? Paul writes in verse 18, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands as is fitting in the Lord. Husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. Children, obey your parents in everything, for this pleases the Lord. Fathers, do not embitter your children, for they will become discouraged. Slaves, obey your earthly masters and do it, not only when their eye is on you and to curry their favor, but with sincerity of heart and reverence for God. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for God, not for human resources. Since you know that you will receive an inheritance from the Lord as a reward. It is the Lord Christ you are serving. Anyone who does wrong will be repaid for their deeds, and there is no Thank you, God. We come before your word as the very words of God. Lord, help us to humble ourselves. Lord, let not our egos, let not our big heads stand in the way of true understanding of what we see. Lord, there are so many things in life that we assume that we know better. That those things have been so shaped by this culture and this time. So help us, Lord God, to relinquish those things, to let go of our pride, and receive your words as the power behind our true and genuine transformation. Thank you in Jesus' name. You know, this is probably one of the most controversial, culturally, socially, one of the most controversial messages that riles a lot of people's objections. Yeah. It is misused quite a bit. In order to really understand what Paul was getting at, we first have to know what he was trying to get at in verses in chapter 2 and then the first part of chapter 3. What does it mean to be a parent, be children in a Christian household under the authority, under the lordship, under the provisions, under the freedom, under the security, under the boundaries, very, very secure and protective boundaries that God has made for us. With all those circumstances, okay? Paul is saying, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, and do so in love. You know, one of the greatest challenges of the Christian life is actually not believing in the gospel. Believing in the gospel is probably the easiest thing to do because grace is free. No one will turn down forgiveness and mercy when it comes without conditions. Unless people become suspicious. Because we live in such a jaded world. You know, what comes afterwards? Receiving the gospel and living through its power, living practically in the most misunderstood, in the most ordinary, the most taken for granted spaces in our lives, and it's one thing to say, Jesus, I want to live for you on Sunday, and it's totally another thing when we come on Mondays, and the next week with our spouses, with our families, with our co-workers. What happens? All of that grace suddenly disappears. We have to remember, Paul is reminding us, the gospel doesn't stop at church. After calling believers to set their minds, that was last week, remember? Set your minds on things above and not things on this earth. And put on Christ like character. And he says, do that within your house. Which doesn't just include your spouses, your children, but even where you work. We tend to compartmentalize and see how we are with our loved ones and how we are. We just think of work as a money-making machine. It's your entire community, your entire circle of influence. That's your life. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. Literally, I want to just turn off my spotlight because I have to work under a spotlight. Work with gadgets and gears and tiny little screws. They always tell me, why do you keep working under the dark? That's what they tell me. It's like you're trying to look at tiny little iPad screws, and my hands are already shaking. And my coworker tells me, hey, man, you're gonna go blind. Just turn on the light, okay? Turn on the light. And if you're getting old too, Moses, you're not that young anymore. He's like, here's these magnifying glasses. They're work glasses, and he showed me. He's like, no, I'm not that old. But he said, no, you gotta put it on soon. I was like, okay. I want to turn off the light. You know why? Because then the spotlight won't be on me. I don't want them to see me. I just want to do my work quietly without me. That's me. That's who I am. But they keep turning on the light on me. And I'm like, no, don't turn the light on me. And it's almost prophetic. It's like, yeah, I know. The spotlight is on. People are looking. They know I'm a pastor. They're looking at every little detail. I'm just help me to have impact. Help me. Paul is doing something so radical. He's placing every relationship, not just your spouse, not just your family, every relationship. He's saying, what you need is a new relationship. That is why we have to be in this way. Number one, he says, faith is actually trusting in the Lord, trusting in Him enough to let go of your ego, to let go of your pride, to let go of your stubborn and to say, Number two, faith that nurtures, not cuts down, not explodes. Number four, faith that looks with integrity, as if we are working. But Paul begins with marriage, obviously. Not because it's the only relationship, not because it's the most important relationship, but actually because it's foundational to the household. Your relationship, who's looking? Who's watching? It's your children. It's your extended family. They're watching they're looking at your relationship. You know, Paul is not endorsing, like, as some would think, like this sense of like self-denying, self-effacing, this inferiority complex where women have to be like silent. And women have to be like, oh, yeah, my husband should shine and I should be in his shadow. No, that's not what Paul is saying. Paul is saying it's not about control. It's not about control. It's this control issues that throws off a lot of people and offends a lot of people. What Paul is saying is, you are living under the authority of Christ. So it doesn't matter if you're a woman or a man. You are under the authority of Christ. So let go. Because those things, at the outset, will offend a lot of people, including the person that you take for granted the most, is your spouse. That is why he says, submit yourselves to your husbands as to the Lord. This kind of faithful submission, it doesn't come naturally. It has to be intentional. It has to be voluntary. You got to fight for it. You have to constantly remind myself, I'm not under my husband's authority. Yeah? Because that will offend you big time, isn't it? Yeah? Am I inferior to my? No, you're not. You're not. We are different creatures because that's how God created us. Differently, but harmoniously, to be a unit, to be a family. But we are on equal ground under the authority of Christ. Rooted in trusting Jesus. Trust Jesus. I trust him. Jesus, I trust him. I am under you. So when it feels and seems like I cannot, by no means just let certain things go, I'm going to do it because I know I trust you. That is so. That is what we can do because we trust in the authority and nature of Christ. And out of reverence. Not fear. Not fear. But out of reverence. Because quite frankly, wives, you guys are a lot faster and smarter than we are. You guys are. You're a lot more emotionally engaged. You're a lot more emotionally intelligent than fickle men. Sorry, I'm not going to go there, okay? I'm going to leave it there. At the same time, Paul says, husbands. And in Ephesians, he said something that is already in the context included in this verse. He says, love your wives as Christ loved the church. And you know what the caveat is? Just as Christ laid down his life for the church. For men, there is nothing more noble than that. Why do we look to the Middle Ages? Not the Dark Ages. I'm talking about the High Middle Ages, where knights were kind of looked upon as the icons of nobility, and They're worthy of honor and glory and all that thing, you know? You know why? Because at the root of what a true nobleman was he was willing to give up his life for the authority and for the well-being of the community. Fiefdom, it's like, he laid down his life for the poor folks, the villagers. He was the first to go out into battle. That's who the cavalry was all about. That's where it came from. The cavalrymen were the first to go out on their horses, but for so many, their horses were bigger than themselves. Why? Because their egos were so big. In the Roman world, husbands had unchecked power. They were called the paterfamilias. Okay, you guys, paterfamilias was basically the father, the patriarch, had the authority to kill anyone in the household. Not just the slaves, not just the servants. To say, you have dishonored. And he had the ability to pronounce judgment upon anyone in the household. They had absolute authority in the household. And it's so radical that Paul was saying, no, your authority, your strength should not lead to exasperation and destruction and killing the spirit of your family, which a lot of men do these days. It should lead, that authority should lead to you loving and showing true love, which is daily reminding your spouse, your children, how much you love them, to sacrifice your life. You gotta express it. You gotta tell them, my life is not my own. My life is here for your soul. All the time, because a lot of times my ego gets in the way. Who am I? I'm the head of this household. I sometimes, it gets when Jesus breaks down false sense of strength. Your strength is not in false men. It is in the power that you have when you submit yourself to God. That's what true power is, isn't it? When love is demonstrated. And when Paul was saying this to the Colossians, I bet you there were some fathers in the midst who were probably so offended. But this is our tradition. This is our culture. This is the way we've been doing this for all this time. This is what's keeping the Roman Empire alive. No, actually, that's what destroyed the Roman Empire. It was the corrupt family system that destroyed the Roman Empire. Think of marriage kind of like I know it's kind of silly, but when was the last time that you danced with your spouse? When I remember, dancing, I remember Luther Vandross's song in the 90s, Dance with My Father Again. Do you remember that song? It's like, think of it as a dance rather than a tug of war. Because sometimes that's how we picture our marriages, don't we? It's like we're tugging at each other. It's a battle of strength and egos, isn't it? When one partner tries to dominate, what happens? The whole dance collapses. healing of salvation. That's when the dance truly becomes meaningful. That is the victory. Number 2. Another thing that offends a lot of children. Yeah. Number 2, what does Paul say? He says, children, obey your parents, for this pleases the Lord. But you don't know, Pastor Moses, what kind of parents I have. What kind of parents I have. You have no idea. That's not Paul's point. So what? I ask myself this. God, you gave me a dad who's a pastor, a grandfather who's a pastor, an uncle who is a pastor, and a mom who's not a pastor, but who's actually more stern and more than a pastor. God, what did you do to my life? My life is ruined. I feel like I'm a slave in my body. I'm living this religious life. I don't feel free. I don't know how many nights I cried as a teenager when my testosterone and hormones were crazy. It wasn't Christ. Now I just cry. Why wasn't I just born to my God? He would always tell me, grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient. And the children are called to obedience, not because parents. I don't think I've ever seen a parent who is perfect. Parents are not perfect. But because obedience is a way of honoring them. If children do not know the honor, the basics of honoring their earthly parents, it will be exponentially difficult to accept or receive or understand any of the life. Look at my parents. Look at them. They are such hypocrites. They say they believe in Jesus with their lips, but look at the way they treat me and look at the way they live. All they live is for their jobs, for their careers, to pay another paycheck. What kind of a life is that? I don't want to live that kind of life the way my parents live. I want to be free. I want to have a life of my own. And they don't understand the true honor and the true liberation and the true lordship that Christ will offer. It's going to be possible. Why do we obey? Not because our parents were perfect, because they never were and they never will be, because they are sinners who need grace. Children who are adults have reference. We have, I'm going to visit my mom today because it's her 82nd birthday. We're going to celebrate her. Converse It's precious. But my aunt and my uncle told me, you know what? To be more humane. You can live with her 24/7. You can go around and visit her as visit her, but there's limits to what you can do. Pray for her. Do as much as you can do. Get her the best help that she can get, and be there for her. But you trying to just hold on to her and have her try to live in an apartment by herself, not knowing how lonely and how tired she is, you're not doing her a favor. You need to think about this. You need to realize this. And take this care. My aunt had to tell me. Don't withhold for her medication that she needs because she doesn't want it. Because she can't really think for herself right now. So you need to be there for her. And in Christ, what love is it to really, really follow her needs? And I have to pray about it. Because in doing so, you are honoring, you are obeying, and you are trusting in the lordship of the one who not only holds your life, but holds the life of your loved ones. And in turn, what this fathers, do not exasperate your children. Do not be bitter. Do not stone your spirit. You know, fathers in the Roman context, they were so offended probably once they heard this. Because they saw themselves as the disciplinarian. You know, that is so duplicitous of me as a father when I say I am a disciplinarian when I myself don't have discipline. I have to look at myself, put my words, put my actions under the lordship of Christ, and I say, help me, God, not to be a disciplinarian, to be a person who walks together with my son. Encourage not to be so critical. And have the opposite end, not to be because this is what crushes and tries. Place yourself under the spiritual guidance. Be kind to each other. Be blessed. Be fair. Lily was sharing about trees and the trees out there. You know, even plants. You know, I've heard stories where plants respond to the over exuberance of human emotions. You know, how our emotions affect our own ability to nurture even the simplest of living things, like a simple tomato plant. It's not that there is some voodoo going on, but it's our heart. Our tender, loving care is what allows the most simple and basic thing in life. How much more so is the gift of children? Children flourish when godly discipline is practiced. Because ultimately faith reshapes parenting from control to do what? To Christ-like. Gentle and neutral. Lastly, faith that works with integrity for the life. Paul says, slaves, Because that was the conventional term back then. And slaves were actually very integral part of the household. They lived in the quarters. Obey your earthly masters with sincerity of heart and reverence for the Lord. Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as one to the Lord. Paul is not endorsing slavery here. That's not what he's doing. He's actually planting the gospel seeds that underline it. Basically what he's saying, slaves, do the best you can. Servants, workers, work as hard as you can. Don't shortchange. Work as if you are working to please the Lord. Not just people who are watching you to deduct points from you, who are out for you if you're under probation or something, who are trying to mark the checklist and say, oh, late to work. Oh, he was supposed to finish this project by this date, but look, already 2 weeks have passed. Oh, nope. Check. We're going to let him go once his probationary period. Is that why we're like scrambling and always under high stress and saying, oh man, I hate my job. I'm keeping for not for eye service. Not for eye service. Not to please people. But faithfulness that is rooted integrity that is rooted in our trust that God is fair and He will reward those who honor Him. There are two kinds of workers: those who work hard when the boss is watching, and those who work faithfully because they know God is watching. And that's why that insecurity of just turn off that light, take that spotlight off of me, because my boss has a window right to my table, so I'm always like, I'm looking at her while I'm working. It's kind of sad, Because when we work to please the Lord, there is no work that is meaningless. It's meaningless because we try to value or to value. That's what God's trying to do. We try to set value to our coworkers. Look at me, I'm a nobody. Look at what I do. I just do this. Oh, look at you. Oh, wow. You really make a difference with what you do in your life. I'm just a menial wage earner. See? It's not just not like that. God is trying to say, no. The worth of your work is not measured by how the world says. For God is just. He doesn't just look at what you do for a living. He actually looks at your intent, your heart. Your boss might only look at your performance. There is no career or no job or work that is meaningless. Because God can turn your seemingly menial work into a powerful witness for the person who is working right next to you. Because that is who God is. calls us to look and approach at our work as an act of what? As an act of worship. As an act of worship. As an act of worship. Is my integrity consistent? When no one's watching. Faith transforms our work into worship. Because ultimately it is the Lord. Remember that. That is when all these things come together. In a Christian household, what happens is we are actually saying, Jesus, come into our household, come into our home, and you be the center of this household. That's what we're saying. Jesus, you are the Lord of this home. Protect this home. Be with us and lead this home throughout submission, mutual submission that reflects the love of Christ. When authority exists not to control but to nurture. When we work with integrity as an act of worship to the Lord. Jesus, come into our home. You are the Lord. It is you, Jesus. It is you that we are serving. Thank you, Jesus, for your amazing grace.